It is obvious that the year 2021 has been a terrible year by far. Regarding the loss we had, especially in our professional bodybuilding, including George Pearson and Shawn, and recently Ishaq Abidal from Iran, which had a terrible impact on the world of bodybuilding. Do you think there is any relevance between their deaths and bodybuilding drugs?
Of course, yeah. These bodybuilders aren't dying of natural causes. They're not dying of old age. I've been saying it all along. It's chemical abuse. Now, there's use and there's abuse. And people will say, well, you did steroids, Shawn. Why are you so down on these other guys? I just think that there's this place that we've gotten to in the sport of bodybuilding that I was arguing about when I first came on board, that the judges were rewarding size for the sake of size, that the mindsets were changing, that bigger is better. And I've always said that quality should always win out on quantity, not because I'm a small guy. I like quality. I loved Bob Paris. I loved Samir Banu. I loved Lee Labrada. I mean, these were not the biggest bodybuilders, but because they weren't the biggest, they didn't necessarily continue to get their propers. I'm on the smaller side of things, which the majority of the athletes I beat were all bigger than me. I'm not sour grapes. Oh, you should have won the 94 Olympia. You should have won the 96 Olympus. I think the fans are more upset that I didn't win than I am. I gave the judges an alternative. I gave them what's possible, what's attainable, by not supersizing it. I came up in an era where there was Lee Haney first, then there was Dorian Yates, and then there was Ronnie Coleman. And in the Dorian Yates, Ronnie Coleman era, there was Paul Dillette, there was Art Atwood, Nasser El Somebody, Marcus Rule. I mean, there's a lot of guys that were 6 foot, 290, 300 pound monsters that did not exist before I arrived on the Olympia stage in 1988. But throughout the 90s, the weights got bigger and bigger and bigger. Even Ronnie Coleman was almost 300 pounds by the time he was getting out of Mr. Olympia. He wasn't better. As a matter of fact, he was probably at his best when he first won the Olympia in 98. So as the athletes got bigger and bigger and bigger, you saw them using different things, insulin and growth hormone, on top of the anabolics that were coming in, on top of the fact that it's too much size for the heart, the human body, to handle. So we have a lot of heart attacks. And it's a matter of time before you start getting bigger and bigger and bigger names. George Peterson was a 212-pound bodybuilder that moved up from classic physique. Every one of these guys that we hear, these big names that are dropping like flies, these guys all have people that are working with them. I didn't have that. When I came up, I think Mohammed Bin Aziza and Andreas Munzer were the two big names that died. Both died of diuretic abuse. Both guys were on anabolics, but it was the diuretics that were changing the way that they were looking. I think the only way to reel it in, we can say bring back drug testing, but we know that drug testing, there's ways to get around it. The only way to reel it in is the bodybuilder has got to be more conscious of their own mortality. These bodybuilders are training and taking things, not thinking about the future and not thinking about what this can actually do. I was of the mindset that if I wasn't training for competition, then I was maintaining. If you'll note, I turned pro at 197 pounds, and I retired. I was competing at 212 pounds. But I was a pro for 14 years. There's a barely 10, 15 pound change.
Wow.
Most of these guys, they turn pro and then boom, they add another 20, 30 pounds. And it's incredibly hard on the heart. Your heart's a muscle, but it's not going to be able to keep up.
Yeah.
And so I think all bodybuilders need to pause on the size. Some of these judges need to consider that just because they're bigger, they're not better. And when they do that, it'll change the mindset of the bodybuilder to going back to becoming an artist. Oh, I don't have to be 300 pounds. I don't have to be 250 pounds. I can just train and get hard and shapely, and that's enough. When I came up, it was enough. And then it started to change. And you'll note in a lot of my interviews, a lot of my articles, I argue against the size factor because there were bigger guys that were winning big shows that just were big, not better.
Not better. Next question is, how can we maintain the size of our muscle even when we are not in prep time or we don't have any plans to compete anymore?
When I stopped competing, I realized I didn't have to look a certain way. I think that when you look back on your career, it's easier to understand how it all unfolds for you. I was a small guy, and even when I got bigger, I still felt like I was the small guy, right? You put on the muscle and the mass and the size, but you still have this feeling. It's not, I never walked around feeling I was big. But for my height, I was huge. 240 pounds in the off season.
Wow.
5'7". I was bigger than most guys my size. My natural bodybuilding weight, or my natural weight, should be 165 pounds for my height. But I was walking around at 240. When it was all over, I was kind of relieved because you have to train to keep that up. And I was a professional bodybuilder making professional money, competing, showing my body. And I was relieved when I no longer had to do that. When I no longer had to jump up and eat every 3 hours. That's 6 meals a day. 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m., 9 p.m. And even sometimes if I'm up later, I'm eating at 11 or 12. 6 or 7 times a day, 5-6 days a week, 14 years as a professional bodybuilder. Yeah. That doesn't count the 3 years when I was an amateur. So I had 17 years of living that lifestyle. I didn't want to try to maintain that because I was no longer getting paid to look that way. Nice. And it takes a lot to feel that way. When I slowed down in the gym, naturally the muscles get smaller. When I slow down being so active, naturally the body fat gets a little bit more. Yeah. But in my mind, I knew what I was doing by retiring, that I was not going to be able to sustain that look. So you have to disengage your mind from validating who you are based on how you look. I no longer was focused on how I looked. I was more focused on how I feel. Yeah, I don't have the definition. The pants are a little tighter. The waistline's a little wider. My muscles are a little smaller. But it's okay because I'm no longer training to look that way. And in my mind, I'm relaxed. A lot of bodybuilders, it's called body dysmorphia. You get caught up in what you think the world thinks that you should look like. A lot of bodybuilders retire, but they continue on the grind because it's all they know. I have a lot of outside interests. Yes. I have a lot of friends that don't go to the gym. So I've filled my time not only getting married, raising children, being a promoter, being an ambassador and a spokesperson. I filled the void of going to the gym 2-3 hours a day, twice a day, with other things that I'm interested in, which doesn't include how I look. I will always work out. I'll always have some sense of good nutrition, but I like a pizza. I like hamburgers. I like fries. These are things I was deprived of for 20 years, but everything in moderation.
You have your balance.
You have to have the balance. Without the balance, you're going to lose your mental capacities, and then you're going to keep doing what you were doing, and then something's going to snap, pop, or break, and then you have the rest of your life to deal with these injuries that you probably would get in retirement that you never had when you're actually working the body the way it's supposed to be worked. So I'm very moderate in the gym, but I'm much more relaxed as a person.